Now I invite Anurada madam. Uh,
So with that, let me start. So I'm going to give a very generic view of my understanding. Let me be very honest. I was not lying when I said it is literature survey, okay? And my interpretation and my understanding, based on a few discussions with Ajay, and also Subramaniam Chidambaram, who was actually supposed to be here to present, and I'm only presenting on his behalf. So once more, you can pardon me for any inadequacies. And Ayushi, who was one of my colleagues who has done tremendous job in consolidating, understanding, helping with discussions and the presentation. All right, so a generic overview to just bring us where we are. And we have our next speaker who will give details of some of the learnings from this. So we have some existing instruments already. My previous speakers have talked about few of them. He talked about the PAT scheme and the energy saving certificates, where we aim to achieve industrial energy efficiency. And we talked a lot about how do we achieve the energy efficiency, how much work is going on. And for me, I remember from the times when the energy efficiency cell was made by CII, and there were energy audits, and every year there was energy conservation awards. I don't know if it still continues, but it used to at that time. By specifying energy saving targets and enable trade of energy saving certificates. Then, of course, the renewable energy certificate, which you are all aware of, which actually allows the states with insignificant RE potential to obtain RE in their procurement portfolio. What comes now is further to that is the pointer doesn't work, that's okay, it does, is the carbon credit trading scheme, which we've been talking about since last 2 hours. So it's a mechanism for trading of carbon credits based on the sectorial GHG emissions. The sectorial is very, it's a misnomer. Actually, it's not really sectorial. It's subsuming many entities under the sector. It could be, it's a mix of steel, cement and all that. So it's still not very sectorial. Benchmark and targets. It will develop methodologies for estimation of carbon emission reductions. Okay, it will develop. I think all your questions, sir, is to be answered. Let me tell you. I don't think any one of us, neither me nor the next speaker, would really be able to give you a pointed answer, but we can give you our thoughts on the direction of what could be possible. And only yesterday or the day before yesterday, I think the green credit program came up, which again was very interesting, proposed to be launched to leverage a competitive market-based approach for green credits, thereby incentivizing voluntary environmental action. So this is what brings in individuals and entities and organizations. For various stakeholders, an activity generating green credits, which may at later time, it doesn't really talk about it, but I presume that it may at a later time also get carbon credits from the same activity under the carbon market. So this actually includes farmer producer organizations, cooperatives, forestry enterprise, agri enterprise. And if you look at what all comes under it, it includes the sustainability of the buildings. It also talks about water. So that's the water and afforestation are fungible. So they the credits can be converted. I think ultimately it's going to be converted in terms of carbon, but it will be green credits. And they also talk about eco-marked products. Okay, now eco-marking is again a term which needs a lot of, I would say, a relook at the definition. Today it is plastics, there's a whole lot. I have a definition, but what is not there is the embedded energy in the remanufactured or recycled products. So there is still no provision to bring that group somewhere out here. Having said that, if we look at the carbon trading, again, people have been talking about what is offset and what is the compliance base. So I would like to distinguish them as one being voluntary and the other being compliance. Okay, so the voluntary is very similar to, say, for example, you have a coal power plant and you want to set up a wind energy. So business as usual case that one would go ahead with maybe improvement in the carbon power plant technology, I'm sorry, coal power plant technology, but would go in for a renewable energy only if it is financially viable, and the financial viability will happen only when the person gets the credits and he's able to sell the credits for that. So that's a project to project basis. Okay. Whereas if you look at compliance, there is an allowance which is given to you, okay, which is based on, as I said, the pseudo definition of sector, okay, allowance which is given to you, and in that allocated allowances, whichever is there, if you are generating, if you have a gap, you still are allowed to generate more, but there is another entity which is not which is generating more, so there is a balance. Okay, the difference, the balance which can be taken care of to ensure that overall there is an incentive for the person to invest in low carbon technologies or green technologies, and there is some time, there is more time for the polluter, okay, to abate. So it's a mitigator and polluter balance, which, as I will show you later, understand that it ultimate goal for us is to bring it to zero. We must keep that in mind. Okay, so by the way, I have a very short presentation. I don't. So the Indian scenario today is, as again the previous session, people had talked about the draft which was brought in 2022, right? Now the draft had, of course, divided the whole proposed transition was in three phases, but the current draft which has come out is in two phases. So they have combined phase 1 and phase 2, wherein from 23 to 25 they expect the PAT scheme to remain in force along with development of the offset market, the fungibility of the ESCs. The problem was there were assimilation of the ESCs which were not getting sold, and therefore fungibility of the ESCs and the RECs into offsets or into converting it into carbon credits is possible, and the availability to be bought from the non-obligated entities. Essentially what it means is we are just giving it some time for registration, for collection, and creating the demand. Okay, and very soon we will have the phase 2, which is focusing on moving to a cap and trade. So that once the allowance base comes, then all these that you have collected is now tradable. Okay, I think this is the main crux of my entire presentation. The top, year A allowance, year B, year C, year D. The gaps between the years is something which we have to decide, okay, and that is where your uncertainty question gets answered. Now I'll tell you what it means. I have given the yellow one as the allowance for this year. Say the industry 1 is producing less than the allowance, the red industry is producing more than the allowance, and that gap, that delta is what is tradable. Okay, that delta is what is tradable. When I go to year B, which could be 10 years down, that we have to decide that number, and that has to be decided now, so that there is certainty for the person, for the entity which is investing in the low carbon technology, that yes, if I do it now, there are so many years for me to calculate how I will get back my money. Okay. Okay, so the year B is where the allowances also come down a little, because we have to progress towards improving the efficiency, right? We have to progress towards low carbon technology. So after say 10 years or whatever, we decide the number, it could be 20 years, but the allowances has to come down, the number has to come down, and the industry 1 has to, because it has already in the green side, probably it has already invested in the high technologies, advanced technologies, which has the, and the industry 2 will start, if you see now it is emitting much less, right? But the delta will be dependent on who's investing more where. At the same time, as we go, if you see the last one, 2070, okay, say 2070, we expect that they would be at par. The allowance would be much lower, but we expect that now it is mitigated. And that is why it's probably right to say that the carbon trading has a finite life. Okay, it is not an it's not a market which is going to be there forever. It's not a financial asset, as he explained to me. I'll put it, so I want to thank him for that. But the fact is that it's a financial tool to accelerate the mitigation, or the accelerate to meet the targets, to achieve the targets of the government which has been set. So that's how we would look at it. So the key insights would be creation of a mechanism for providing financial sources to accelerate deployment of the technologies, appropriate regulatory framework to lend stability to the carbon market, and this is where your pricing will come into picture, because this is not something new. You know it, that it was there. The Chicago Carbon Exchange was there earlier, and let me also tell you, I'm a personal hit on that. My daughter, after finishing her literature, she said no, she was very interested in carbon market. She went to Edinburgh to do a course on carbon management, and then it crashed, the market crashed. So she had to come back. She did law, and she decided now she's going to do law and she's going to work in this again. That's a different thing. Okay, so okay, and then emission allowance has to be a moving target as we move towards net zero. Essentially, net zero has to become zero. Zero may be the baseline, right? And it has a defined life. What is the role of academia here is most important. Almost in all the areas, the science-based targets are the most important. If IIT Madras has gone and done the energy auditing, it is because they have the background of the science. If they found out that the compressor efficiencies has to be improved, it is because it's a science and technology-based study. So science-based targets, that would, when you say how much, that will be answered by these scientists. Science-based targets provides a defined pathway for companies to reduce their GHG emissions. This is what will decide, to a large extent, the allowance. This will decide the number of years. That will tell us how much time is going to take for the newer disruptive technologies to come up. This will also decide what would be the change in the allowances. Right, so it's very, very important that academia plays its role, and it can help industries to define these targets for the sector and individual firms. So it might be in an overall pseudo sector definition, but ultimately it is, we don't even need to go to the carbon market. Right, in ESG itself, every time we have to declare a target. Right, we have to declare target on how much would be the reduction in the emissions, which could be embodied energy is also included there. That's one place where it's included. Okay, and the role of industries is carbon trading is one of the many tools we must, the industries have to remember that it's to support abatement objectives and not necessarily to be used as a way of profit forever. So that there is a conscience which is very, very important out here, role to play. So, I look at it this way. In the overall scheme, there is an integrated approach to reach the green economy, to reach our targets which India has set. All right, in which carbon trading alone, probably, carbon trading is one, but alone it cannot achieve what it has to. There has to be circular economy, lot of work on it, and there has to be green credit trading. Now, I separate green credit trading from carbon only because green credit involves other things like water conservation, etc. also. So it's very important that we give. Now, what is that factor that we will use? What will be the conversion formula is something which we all have to work on. But that's also needed to be worked. So unless all the three are not integrated. Now, I'll give you one more example why it's important. When we say circular economy, for example, what does it mean? Recycling comes into picture, remanufacturing comes into picture, redesigning comes into picture, right? When all of them are there, they are all there with an objective of reducing the carbon footprint. Any new material for it, any new design, so that manufacturing becomes easy, wastage is less, recycling is easier, repair is easier, so that we reduce the natural resources. It's not just the resources, it's the embodied energy, because we are using it and using it again. All right, so unless we don't have that, and unless there is no incentive and we don't make a business out of it, it is very difficult for us to give it a number. Having said that, the key drivers would be appropriate regulatory framework to provide stability in carbon markets, which we need to work on. Sector-wise baseline determination. So I don't have an answer to how. The fact is academia has to work on it, and this is something I was very impressed by the edge. That's typically setting a baseline. So I think we'll need to go sector by sector, and it's not very difficult because there'll be a number of people working on each sector, but we need to determine the baseline. Roadmap for science-based emission reduction trajectory. I think this is something which we can work on now, so that also gives a direction for the research. Okay, so it gives a roadmap for IITs to know which direction to go, and if that is in alignment and it is in tune with, say, B is aware of it, World Bank is aware of it, the government is aware of it, Niti Aayog is aware of it, PSA's office is aware of it, and if all of them are aligned on the trajectory. In fact, today in India we have a lot of targets, we don't have a roadmap. We only have targets. So if we can have a roadmap, which can be here, especially science-based, it is for this roadmap on a science-based target, I think that will be very important. ESG will again provide a road to it. R&D investment, we need all types of R&D. We need frugal tech and innovation. We need disruptive technologies. We need advanced technologies like AI and ML also to be used. And we need green technologies where we talk about green chemistry and whatever, all those things. Climate financing for pilots and demonstrations. Of course, it's related to carbon trading in some way. Risk assessment for scarce resources. I think this is something which we cannot miss out. Very, very important if we really want to do good there. When I say scarce resources, it talks about even water, it talks about different minerals, everything. We might say that we want to go reduce a carbon footprint, but if the material is scarce, we'll be back to square one. Financial models to stabilize carbon market and global alignment. This is what we were talking about some time back. It's very important to have financial and economic models built. And this is again where academia can help. And then of course, this is just a thought which both Ajay and me were discussing. Collaborate with the government to develop a live workable application. It's very similar to a Hydrogen Valley, but in a bigger scale. If we can have a model town or a model, something more than a village where there are some industries also, and start applying our models there, that might be very, very helpful. With that, I finish here. Thank you.